Naomi Potter is the director and curator of the Esker Foundation in Calgary. It's the largest private nonprofit contemporary art gallery in Canada. Over the last 20 years, she's developed numerous curatorial, artist, and residency projects in Canada, Central and Eastern Europe. In 2003, Potter was awarded a year-long DAAD artist residency in Istanbul, and from 2003 to 2007, she was co-director of the International Artist Residency Program at CESTA in the Czech Republic. From 2009 to 11, she was curator of the Walter Phillips Gallery at the Banff Center, where she produced solo projects and exhibitions with many artists, including Anthony Burnham, Jeffrey Farmer, Melanie Gilligan, Brian Youngin, and Silke Knapp, among many others. More recently, she's worked to develop solo projects at the Esker Foundation with Peter von Tiesenhausen, Janet Werner, Mia Feuer, Cedric Bomford, and Etienne Zach, to name a few. In 2014, she was selected as one of Alberta's 50 most influential people by Venture magazine. And in 2015 was a guest of both the Australian Arts Council and the British Council International Curatorial Visit Programs. She currently sits on the board of directors at Stride Gallery in Calgary. Potter holds a BFA from the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, and an MFA in sculpture from Concordia University in Montreal. So, looking forward to this. Please welcome Naomi Potter.
Hi, lovely to see everyone this evening on a lovely rainy night. I'm just going to pull up a video first. I'm going to get rid of the cheesy music. All right, I'm just going to let that loop. Thank you, Jesse and Natalie, for inviting me out and up to Edmonton, where I have never spoken, so it's my pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Naomi Potter, and I am the director and curator at Esker Foundation. As you can tell from my bio, I have a little bit of a past as an artist, and have, in the last probably 15 years, transitioned into being more of an arts administrator. So I'm not actually going to talk about my practice. I'm going to really talk about Esker Foundation, because I think it's a pretty interesting project. What you're seeing here is the build of what was called the Traveler at Esker Foundation, Jim and Cedric Bomford. This build actually took almost 2 weeks of constant building, and the final work, as you see, is coming together. This work references the Lethbridge high-level bridge. If anyone's from Lethbridge, you might see a resemblance. I'm just going to put my timer on so that I don't go over. All right. My talk, and the reason I'm showing this, is very much about building new structures, new ideas, and new relationships between contemporary art and the public. How does one build a museum of the future? So this idea of tearing something down, or repurposing the best of something to make something new. Or as Cedric Bomford likes to say, thinking through building. Structurally porous and perpetually in progress, how do we build and continue to build on ideas developed by Esker Foundation? How to propose an institution that is responsive, active, and crucial to the development of a new kind of gallery. I'm constantly interested in conversations about the new museum or the gallery of the future. How are these built? How are they managed? And what is the legacy of their contribution? What will be the value of creative engagement, artistic practice, and conscious and open-minded consideration of our place in the civil society? Can we be a voice to advocate for respect, dignity, and freedom, or is that not the role of an institution? Holland Carter in the New York Times October 28, 2015 article called "Towards a Museum of the 21st Century" stated, How will we know when it arrives? There will be no single model, and there shouldn't be. Art and life, which are equally a museum's business, are too complicated to be reflected in any one mirror. The new museum won't be defined by an architectural glamour or by market-vetted collections, although it might have these. Structurally porous and perpetually in progress, it will be defined by its own role as a shaper of values and by the broader audience it attracts. Canadian curator Shannon Stratton said, when asked what she hoped would be a prediction for 2017 in Canadian art, said, "I want to see art play a more important role in communicating the difficulties of the times we are in to a broader and more engaged audience. I want to see art normalized as an important and powerful tool for education, dissent, and catalyzing discourses, and steer away from its alliance with the luxury goods market. This, of course, requires change in the way art is displayed, curated, contextualized, circulated, and so forth. So perhaps I want to see new ways of administering art, new spaces for gathering around it, and a displacement of the more calcified systems of institutions." When faced with an opportunity of a lifetime to create a new art gallery, essentially from scratch, where does one start and what does one do? Part 1, the foundation. Founded in 2012, in May, by Calgary-based collectors and philanthropists Jim and Susan Hill, who saw a need for contemporary art in Calgary, Esker Foundation is housed on the top floor of a multi-use commercial building that you see in this image. So that whole top corner is the gallery. This building is called the Atlantic Avenue Art Block after the original name of 9th Avenue, which was Atlantic Avenue. Initially, the Hills considered a standalone gallery, but on closer look at the financial benefits of not doing this, chose instead to build a building in which the gallery would be but one tenant. Often, the model of a standalone gallery serves as a central focus, seeing the growth of small business around its skirts to capitalize on visitors' needs for pre- and post-viewing needs of coffee, food, shopping. But the museum and the gallery often does not financially benefit from being the reason these people are there in the first place. With the Esker model, the services that our visitors might appreciate is available to them in the building, which provides two highly valuable benefits. I don't have to manage a restaurant or coffee shop, and the gallery indirectly financially benefits from this. So as you see along the base of that building are retail on the ground floor, creative industries on the second, third, and half of the fourth floor, and then the gallery shares the rest of the other half of the fourth floor. So a portion of the revenue that's generated from these leased spaces provides Esker Foundation with its yearly $2 million operating budget. So in essence, if you go downstairs and buy a cup of coffee or a pair of jeans, you're actually supporting both the business and the gallery. And in return, we offer free programs, free admission, and free parking. And we also don't have to rent our space out. So essentially, myself and my staff do zero fundraising, which is a huge benefit in terms of developing exhibitions and programs. The Hills' commitment to art is ongoing. Their initial investment in the building and in the gallery, and then on a yearly basis, they continue to give by not pulling themselves a revenue from this building. I like to call this a double dose of philanthropy. And to note, this is not a vanity project. This is not the Hill Foundation. It is the Esker Foundation. And their investment is one that is actually refreshingly free of ego or personal gain. The internal. So what do we do with this incredible gift that we've given? Combining an international program with a sustained interest in local, regional, and national production, the Foundation supports through exhibitions, commissions, and publications, groundbreaking new works, ideas, and research. And I'm going to cycle through about 6 of the last shows that we have done at Esker. I'm not going to talk a great deal about each, but it'll give you a little bit of a taste of what we've been doing. The first, Beth Stewart, Doubting Thomas, and Cynthia Gerard, Unicorns and Dictators. This is Cynthia Gerard's work. Her work deals in class struggle, social utopias, and the game of politics and power. Her paintings and sculpture borrow from the lineage of political theater, theater by, of, and for the people. She picks freely from Western history to select costumes and props, bringing together a commanding cast of unlikely characters, settings, and struggles, with an absurdist hand and a comic voice, creating something that sparkles like a fairy tale, but delivers the somber punch of social satire. And I started this presentation by showing you the empty gallery, because I think we constantly go back to the empty gallery. And where do we take the gallery for each exhibition? Cynthia's work was really incredible because she introduced this idea of rethinking the painting by taking it off the wall and building all these structures to place the painting, as well as drawings, works by other artists onto these scaffoldings. So it really created very much of a maze. This is the work of Beth Stewart. Both artists are interesting. They're painters. They come from a painting tradition, but they're interested in thinking or rethinking what painting is. What does it mean to be a painter today? And so there's aspects of painting in both of their practice, but also taking those paintings from just a flat surface into the 3-dimension. Doubting Thomas presented a constellation of works from Stewart's unfolding project that considers the difficulty and possibility of mapping geometric abstraction onto the body via the diverse discourses of craft, costume, painting, and sculpture. So you see a real diverse, the chain is porcelain, painting, lots of really interesting use of material with Beth. These are hand-blown orbs, and filled in the orbs are macaroni. And not just any macaroni, they're actually corn macaroni, because corn macaroni has a better yellow than regular macaroni. If anyone's interested. We have a staff of 7, myself and another curator, and a research position that represents the curatorial department, so that's 3. We have 2 positions in engagement, and they work on public programs, our volunteer program, as well as our visitor experience. So that's just 2. We have a marketing and communications position, and we have a head prep. So there is actually only 7 of us. Someone visiting from Quebec City a couple of weeks ago assumed from the outside that we were a staff of at least 15. So that made me feel pretty great. Extra staff for installations are hired as we need them. The other interesting thing about us, we do not have a board. Decisions are made with the staff, and higher level strategic planning made with myself and Jim Hill. In some sense, it's run like a family business. Commitment to the project is high, and personal investment in the staff from the family is huge. Decisions that are made are always done so with the foundation's best interest in mind. This also makes us quick and nimble, and in some sense, not afraid to try, as we have been told that failure is part of the process. This investment in allowing creative people to make creative decisions is, I believe, one of the most important things that Esker is showing. And I think this support and open-ended thinking has made our exhibitions and our programs incredibly unique. Artists are welcome into this family and given everything we can possibly throw at them. The end result is a reputation that speaks to our commitment to supporting artists and their production. Mia Feuer, Kevin Schmidt, Guido van der Werf. This is the work of Mia Feuer. This exhibition was called Synthetic Seasons. Mia is interested in the post-natural landscape, visible sites where human action, be it personal, social, political, or financial, has altered or is in the process of rapidly changing the land, and thus our relationship to it. Her work makes connections between our intense material dependency and the accelerated environmental impact this creates. This work was done in response to her visit to the oil sands in Fort Mac, where she went kind of undercover and was toured around the sailing ponds, and this is the work that came out of that. So it is a ice rink with synthetic ice that is often now being used by malls and inside other spaces that can achieve ice. Instead of it being white, it's black, and it was intended for a solitary skater. So we had skates of every size, and you could come and put them on and have a solitary skate on the rink while contemplating this incredible sort of ecological disaster above you. Guido van der Werf. He is a Dutch artist. We showed 3 of his films. Often when we work with artists, we'll start with a single artist, and we started with Mia, and often the question is, if you could show with anyone, who would you show with? And that's a kind of a fun question to ask an artist, who they want to share this space with. And Mia said, oh, there's this artist, and I can't remember his name, and I saw his work, and it's this incredible piece where this guy is walking in front of an icebreaker, and all you see is just this person trudging along, and the icebreaker is just looming behind him. And I was like, oh yeah, Guido van der Werf, and she's, yeah. So we contacted his gallery and were able to show 3 of his films, so that was really exciting and a really nice pairing. His films weave together meticulous cinematography, symphonic scores, and a durational performance to create enigmatic and ambitious and ambiguous narratives. Marked by a meditative, dreamlike quality and punctuated with surprising moments of deadpan humor, van der Werf's work explores themes such as loss, solitude, belonging, and the self. Kevin Schmidt, A Sign in the Northwest Passage, is essentially the documentation of the creation, delivery, and subsequent search for a cedar billboard that Schmidt emblazoned with foreboding messages from the Book of Revelations, and then placed on the steadily melting ice of the Northwest Passage, blurring the boundaries between durational performance, land art, and installation. A Sign in the Northwest Passage asked powerful questions about sovereignty, Arctic sovereignty, colonialism, and climate change. So we installed a tent in the gallery, and the film of him looking for the billboard was projected in here, and then we had a series of photographs, so that's on the interior of the tent-like structure. And there's photographs. Essentially the project was that he went out onto the ice and installed this billboard in the winter, and then in the summer went back to look for it, and went out on a boat with the same guys that he had gone out on skidoos to look for the billboard. Obviously it was gone, but he then went up in a plane and spent several weeks looking for this, never found, so it's disappeared, it's still out there somewhere. The interesting thing, and what we didn't realize, is the piece across from that is called Sled, Mia's Sled, and she made that during an Arctic residency that she had done, in which she was on a tall ship that sailed around the same waters that this billboard would have been floating around in. Mia's project was to pick up debris and junk floating both in the water and on icebergs. So it was kind of amazing. I didn't know that they were both kind of made or that was generated in the same body of water. So it was interesting that Kevin's work actually became sea trash, and Mia's work right across from it in the same room was essentially taking that trash and turning it into an artwork. So I really love those moments when there's kind of a serendipity between production, which I think is really exciting. I'll leave that up again because you can read it this time. It's pretty interesting. Esker Foundation does not collect. We leave collecting to older institutions who have this in their mandate. Being a Class A gallery, we can borrow. Jim Hill was clear on this point. Collections take up space and resources, and the work never gets as much time as it should on the walls. This elevates the pressure to collect, and in what direction. And as a note, private foundations, particularly in the States and in Europe, are built out of a collection of a single individual. So an individual will collect, it will get to a certain size in which a building is necessary, hours are posted, private tours are given, but exhibitions are almost exclusively pulled from that collection. And while these exhibitions are usually very good, as private money is able to collect often better than public institutions, the vision of the foundation is only through the founder's taste. And I want to make this really clear that this is not the case at Esker. Exhibitions are developed through a rigorous series of ongoing questions and considerations as to what kind of work resonates with us, the curatorial team, and is present in a larger kind of conversation and has relevance for anyone that walks in. Jack Bush in studio, curated by Dr. Sarah Stannards and Colleen Heslin, Needles and Pins. Straight up painting show. Jim Hill, his one request actually to me when I first started was, I would love to see a Jack Bush show. Jack Bush was a very influential painter who spent most of his life in Toronto. You don't often get to see a lot of Jack Bush paintings this far west. However, one of the biggest and most loveliest of the Jack Bush paintings in this exhibition came from the collection right here at the U of A. So this was an interesting kind of conundrum for me. We're a contemporary art gallery. Why are we going to show work that was done in the 50s and the 60s? And for me, it was actually an interesting exercise, how to bring work in that had a kind of historical context and how to make it contemporary. So I wanted to find someone to pair with Jack Bush who could stand up to these powerful, color-filled paintings, but who also had a narrative of their own. And I chose Colleen Heslin to do that. Colleen Heslin is a young painter from Vancouver, and she's actually, although she calls herself a painting, these aren't paintings. They are, she takes various types of linen and canvas and she hand dyes them. Her studio is full of piles of fabric and then she sews them together. So the lines that you see in these works is not a brush line, it's a sewn line. So they're essentially kind of like abstract quilts that she then stretches over a frame, and they take on this incredibly powerful kind of color field presence. And you have to kind of pinch yourself or remind yourself that these are actually paintings. They're pretty amazing. This is more of Colleen's work. These were really big paintings as well, really beautiful. And then Jack Bush. So the two you're looking at in the center of the image are Jack Bush. One from, Sarah and I selected paintings made between 1959 and 1972, feeling like the 60s were sort of his most exciting time in terms of color. And that's what I was really attracted to, and I felt that that was a really good dialogue with Colleen Heslin. On the left are Jack Bush paintings, the three on the left, and the three on the right, or it'd be, yeah, your left. And on the right are Colleen's works. So you can see the kind of conversation that's happening between those two artists. What was really exciting about this exhibition is Jack Bush has a fair amount of historical importance and clout, and so a lot of people came out to see his work. They didn't know who Colleen Heslin was. They didn't think she would be interesting at all. And in fact, those people left loving Colleen's work more than Jack Bush's work. And then in sort of contrast to that, we had a lot of, such as you, undergrad and graduate students of painting coming in because they had heard there was this young woman from Vancouver who was a painter, but she wasn't painting at all. And her practice is really rooted in feminism, and you know, she would probably say she's more interested in Helen Frankenthaler than she is in Jack Bush. So they really wanted to see what this young woman was doing, and they got there and standing in front of a Jack Bush painting from 1962, and they couldn't believe how relevant and resonant it was to them. And that for me was a really exciting moment, to be able to take sort of two generations, kind of a young generation and an older generation, and be able to kind of blow their minds a little bit on each side. And so we felt that this exhibition was really exciting. And we're working on another one that's going to be doing the same thing. And I really like the challenge of taking something kind of more historical and having a contemporary conversation, because these paintings are really quite relevant. So on the left, the three bright ones are Jack Bush, and the two smaller ones are Colleen Heslin. So again, you can really see that kind of conversation happening. We have 3 exhibition seasons per year: fall, winter, spring, and summer. Our curatorial vision is based on the support of artists first and foremost. Exhibitions now tend to not circle around a curatorial framework, but instead focus on artist production, generally presenting 2 or more artists in conversation with each other, so in kind of smaller solo exhibitions, as you've just seen. And we tend to not draw lines between practice, but leave that work to the viewer to discover on their own. So for allowing a more organic, intuitive, and responsive experience for visitors. But we obviously take our curatorial pairing very serious. We're interested in overarching themes as more of a response to trends or areas of research that appear to be compelling, critical energies, topical discussions, and looking for ways to foster dialogue, create points for exchange, or simply sharing information about contemporary practice. The founders themselves do not involve themselves in curatorial decision making, like I have said, and this leaves the gallery team leave this to the gallery team, which is kind of amazing that they themselves see every exhibition as an opportunity to learn. So that learning component is really important. Waffle Bilal, Richard Ibgi, and Mary Lou Lemons, and Etienne Zach are the next set of 3 exhibitions that we put together. This is Waffle Bilal's 16801 project, and this was curated by Srimyo Mitra and circulated by the Art Gallery of Windsor. Iraqi-born, New York-based artist Waffle Bilal is incredible. Just go and Google his past work. He has done some of the most political, heart-wrenching, and brutal works that I have ever seen. This 16801 project was essentially, he wanted to do something that was a little bit more generous. The College of Fine Arts at the University of Baghdad, whose library was looted and destroyed in 2003 during one of the bombings of Iraq. And so the college, so think about it, your own college, what if your library got bombed and destroyed, so you have no more books? I mean, you probably don't have a college either, but you also don't have any books. And so the idea was that he did a Kickstarter campaign and then donations from people. We started with a white bookshelf, empty white books, and this refers to this idea of draining of knowledge. And he cites an Iraqi sort of proverb in which the Mongol army back in like 1205 also sieged this library of learning and threw all the books into the river, and it took 168 hours for all the knowledge to drain out of those books and to turn the river black from all of the ink in the books, and that really stuck with Wafa. And so this idea of you start with an empty white bookshelf and you slowly fill it back up with real books. So it was a kind of a combination of donations and money. So we had books arriving on a daily basis that we would then catalog and put into a list. People could come in and bring books. And these books were selected by the students and faculty at the college in Baghdad. We weren't just assuming what they wanted. This was a list, and they actually have a really strong craft program. So there's a lot of ceramics books and textiles, which was interesting, but an incredible collection. So, and every weekend we would have volunteers, and they would take 3 shelves of white books away and replace it with real books. Is that the last one? And all of those books are still sitting in Esker. They're actually sitting in our loading dock, and we are sending them to Baghdad. So that is the kind of the full circle of the project. Is all these collected books will go to the university in Baghdad, and we'll start to regenerate this library. Wafa's second part of this project is he's also working with an architect to design the bookshelves and the furniture and the chairs so that the books have somewhere to go when they finally get here. There's been a ton of red tape. I've been working on this project actually for almost a year. We needed to get various approvals from not only the college but for the Minister of Culture. We had to have a list of every single book and a description of every single book that had to be translated, and all of those books had to be approved. And all of that is done, and I actually just got the letter on Wednesday that we're allowed to go ahead and ship these books to Baghdad. So they're on their way. Yeah, it's really great. It's been a really interesting project. And then along with that, his Ashes series. And for Wafa, it was important to bring images of violence and war of the Middle East to kind of create empathy and humanize these violent images. So the images that you see, and I'll just get a close-up. So he took images that were highly circulated in the media and recreated these as tiny models that were about this big, and then rephotographed them. So what you're seeing is a model that Wafa made of a picture that was circulated by the press of the Gulf War. So he's got things like Saddam Hussein's bedroom, and this one, which is really incredible, of this bookseller street in Baghdad. So he recreates these methodically, and then rephotographs them, and then shows the photograph. So there's always things that are slightly off. The scale's a bit odd. Things don't quite match up. Sometimes you can see like the buildings, you can see the foam core. but they're really quite eerie and incredible works. Alongside that, Richard Ipke and Mary Lou Lemon's Real Failure Needs No Excuse, one of the best titles ever for a video, consisting of a series of actions filmed in an empty office building in Glasgow. Real Failure Needs No Excuse investigates the transgressive potential of non-productive action and its relation to labor, work, and the imagination. The video presents continuous flows of action in which materials are ordered, piled, and assembled in various configurations, but nothing ever gets made and nothing is ever produced. And then Etienne Zach, who is very lovely, he's a very good friend of mine, and it was wonderful to finally show his work, and he's coming to speak to you, which is great. His paintings, his exhibition was called Those Lacking Imagination Take Refuge in Reality. We presented a series of really recent works that continues his interest in the relationship between art and text. Beautiful show. Each painting is a highly composed study of accumulation, omission, and revision. Suggestive documents are stacked, slotted together, and carved into letter-like forms. There's an installation shot. There's neon lights and electric cords and bare bulbs, shadowy slashes, and so this idea of sort of enlightenment, but also censorship and erasure as well. And of course, it went incredibly well with the Shelf project. There's a lot of kind of quite dark elements in this work. All right, I have in my notes that I'm supposed to take a drink of water. All right, not bad. Okay. We've recently rolled out an initiative called Permanent Collection. So for each season of exhibitions, we commission a piece of writing from someone outside the visual arts bubble, which aims to speak to all of the exhibitions together. And as I noted when we present our exhibitions, each exhibition has its own didactic. So we don't present an overarching kind of umbrella theme of these 3 exhibitions are about this. No, we deal with them individually, and we leave that to you, the audience. The idea being to generate new ideas and connections about and between the works in the gallery from an outside or tangential position. The question we continually ask ourselves is, how relevant is all of this? This outside perspective helps to strengthen and expand our sphere of influence and acts as a kind of a litmus test for how relevant our exhibitions and programming actually are. These writings, we haven't yet gone public with them. We're still kind of figuring what to do. We've got, I think, almost 8 altogether, but we're thinking that 8 might be the magic number. So we're probably going to bind those somehow. And we're interested in kind of looking at our curatorial trajectory, continuing to look for connections, conversations, not only between current exhibitions, but also between those we haven't yet completed and those we haven't yet started. Additional publications we do produce, but it really depends on the exhibition, and we really only do that when it makes sense. Jasmina Siebeck, Cedric Bomford, and Larissa Fasler. This was last fall, 3-person exhibition. I really loved this exhibition. This is the work of Larissa Fasler. It was called Civic Center. For the past 10 years, Fasler's been making map drawing hybrids and objects of urban spaces that comfortably exist between models, sculptures, and relational actions. Her work is developed using a self-mapping exercise, walking, counting, and note-taking, often charting the same territory multiple times, which generates a series of interpretations of the same space that differ in precision, dimension, and proportions. So what she means by that is, say you take the main square downtown and you spend a month watching people. How do they walk through it? What do you hear people say? What are people wearing? Then you also map it out, but you map it out using your body. So you walk the space. How many steps from this lamppost to this lamppost? How many lampposts are there? How many security cameras are there? How many police are there? So really looking at the kind of how these spaces, it's almost like putting a human face on these kind of very stark civic spaces. She's done projects in Berlin, Paris, and she did one for us in Calgary. These notations are then transcribed or modeled to activate each layer of architectural detail, advertising slogan, conversation, action, and census-like observations of highly complex public sites. These two in the middle were Gare Nord in Paris, and so these tiny little models were developed basically after she spent almost 2 months every day going to this space and recording them, and then she goes back to her studio and she's got these wonderful little notebooks, and she goes back and then she recreates them into small models, which are really interesting. The 4 pieces in the front were a piece that she did about Calgary, and really looking at public space and private space and the difference between the two. This is Cedric Bomford and Jim Bomford, who we started with. They do really interesting work, and they just love building stuff, and they showed up with a container full of wood and just started building and built and built and built, and this was the result. This is the piece that you saw being built, called The Traveler. Like the vernacular and provisional architectural expressions found in resource camps or in the initial building stages of both urban and rural communities referenced by Cedric's kind of ongoing project, this project takes early settler infrastructure as its foundation, in particular the eccentric buildings and machines that were built to perform specific tasks, which would be discarded once the task was done. So these are all modeled after things that help to build railway bridges and railway lines that you'll see if you look at old archival photographs, particularly of the West, of the railway being built across the prairies. There's all these incredible machines that were built to do that, and then once they were finished, they just threw them away, or they're lying beside the track, or there's no use for them. It's a pretty fun project. You could climb all over this, which was great. And then in the background is Jasmina Civic. Jasmina is based between London and Ljubljana, and she's sort of one of a new generation of Slovenian artists whose practice, although acutely conscious of specific national, political, and cultural lineage, creates very distinctive language of its own. Her films, sculptures, and performances focus on the mechanisms that assist in the creation of national myths, so nation building, as well as how the authority that delegate them in the first place deals with these myths once their moments have passed. So think about monument building. A really good way to think about this work. She uses a lot of slogans, so things that come up during political campaigns. There's a performance element to her work in which she inserts these figures that are sort of moving these political slogans around, which are really wonderful. Can't really see these, but all these slogans are taken from political speeches. So everybody from Margaret Thatcher to Hitler to Mussolini, talking about how architecture is used to build national identity. Really interesting artist. Highly recommend checking her out. And this film, Tear Down and Rebuild, which is part of a 3-part film series, is really incredible. We support the local while participating in the national and global conversation. Our exhibitions are not grounded in any particular region or country. We feel it's important not only to support, but also to feed the local art community. So we present work from away, but when it makes sense, we also support the work and ideas being developed right here in Alberta, but also coast to coast to coast, with an eye on diversity and exploring as many angles and perspectives as possible. This next show, a little bit of a deviation, it is a group show, Earthlings, and this presented primarily the work by Inuit artists, Roger Aksajiwak, Shuvanai Ashuna, Pierre Opolajak, Jesse Kanagulak, John Kurag, and Leo Napiak, and then the Toronto-based artist Sheree Boyle. This was essentially a ceramics and drawing exhibition that dealt with both individual and collaborative work. It was otherworldly, surreal, magical, underpinned by complex narratives. The work in the exhibition presented a range of deeply personal practices that were informed by reality, myth, real and imagined spaces, sensuality, spirituality. This is a new piece by Sheree Boyle. She made a small ceramic sculpture every day for a month that dealt with items that she had heard on the news. So we have suicide bombers and things from stories and concerts that she had seen. This is a combination of work from Rankin Inlet. There's a really interesting, long-standing ceramic studio in Rankin Inlet. It's the only Arctic producing ceramic facility in the world, called Matchbox. We had 5 artists from that that produced this really incredible, wonderful work. And then alongside Sheree as well. And 2 of the artists from Rankin Inlet and Sheree did a residency in Medalta. Shubhanaya Shuna, whose work, if you don't know it, check it out. I mean, she's maybe one of the most incredible Canadian artists. She's based in Cape Dorset. Just really magical work. This might be it. Come on. This is work that Sheree and Shubhanaya did together. They did a lot of collaborative drawing and sculpture together. It's not liking this. There's some of the collaborative work. And some more. This was a piece that Sheree and Shubhanaya did together called Western Medicine. Project space. We have a window on the 9th Avenue. This is the work of Jude Grebel, A Strange Settings. We really see this as a vital alternative venue that aims to engage the community by increased presence and accessibility of contemporary art at street level. As a commissioning body, the project space invites emerging and established artists to develop new, responsive projects that directly address the neighborhood and explore important contemporary issues. This space was given to us. I think they thought we would put like a sign that would say like open 9 to 5, but instead we decided that we actually wanted to put art in that space. It was pretty important to kind of activate that. This is Sam Fasson, is a collaborative duo from jasmine to grass, and they developed custom scents for 6 people who worked in the building, which was pretty incredible. So you could go in there, and every week they changed the scent, and the scent was based on a story that they had been told by this person, and they worked with a perfumier who developed the scent based on the story, which was pretty interesting. And then Laura Dutton, Night Comes On, which was this wonderful video installation. So all of these little boxes are essentially a video shot at night of people watching fireworks on their balcony. So it looked like this amazing kind of condo. There's a lot of development in our area right now, a lot of condo development like there is everywhere. So we really felt this was a really nice way to address that. Check my time. Okay. So does this model work? Do people actually come to our gallery? How to bring relevance and accessibility to the diverse and complex communities we would really like to serve. And how do we do that? We do that through a really forward-thinking education program. We do talks, tours, workshops, screenings, and at the front here I've left our latest exhibition that we just opened on Friday, Marianne Barkhouse and Post Commodity. Really fantastic exhibition, really great artists. In here you'll see the range of kind of programming that we do. We really curate our program around the exhibitions. It's really important that it's not done kind of outside of that, but that every single opportunity to engage also links directly back. And that includes, we have a program for babies. The babies come with a caregiver, but we actually stand in front of art and talk about the art to the caregivers, but we also talk about interesting facts about, when babies start to recognize color and shape and form, and when you're actually modeling their brain, and the caregivers get really excited about that. But it's really important, and that's how you get people in. Artists don't live in a different world than we do. They live in the same world as we do. And so trying to find ways to activate that is really important. This is an opening. Our openings are really popular. We do have a lot of people that come, which is really exciting. We've also just developed an app. So if you want to download our app, there's tons of content. We record content for almost every piece in the exhibition, plus upcoming stuff. You can register for programs. There's things on the project space. It's a really great tool. So I just want to circle back to the idea of the gallery of the future, which is really the gallery of the present. Much of these ideas have been developed through conversations with Jim Hill, who tends to turn everything upside down, asking, why does it work? Why do you do that? And who does these exhibitions and these public programs serve? Coming from various public institutions, the aim always seems to be to create sophisticated and cutting-edge exhibitions with vivid programming to match, but only on paper, without really stopping to consider if this panel discussion or this video program would actually speak to anyone other than the inner circle of the art community. How do we as an industry do this without being at risk of losing precious and limited funding? How do we support artistic production that should be cutting edge, difficult, and ask questions of the world we live in? The Esker Foundation, because of the trust of the founders and the stable funding model they have created, allows me to keep the following questions at play. And I just want to throw these out there because I don't have the answers for them, but there's something as a director I think about a lot, and I think they're really important to keep these at play and make sure that we are thinking about what our role is. And to do that, I'm going to play my last video. Very hard to see all these. I'm gonna get rid of that one.
Do you want me to go on it?
No, it's okay. Did it. Okay, I'm gonna turn this down because it's also cheesy. What I'm gonna show you is the show before the one we just opened. Jason DeHaan, who grew up in Edmonton and now calls Calgary home. He went to ACAD. Really incredible artist, and it was a pleasure to work with him. So, these questions. How does one build an institution without becoming too institutional? How to harness the for-profit model, one that relies on ingenuity and the intelligence of people, innovation, and striving to be the best in their industry for the nonprofit world, which increasingly seems muzzled by fears around loss of funding. How to shake off the fear of not being funded, which makes our industry conservative, which in turn affects programming, but also causes paralysis, exhaustion, and burnout in the creative people who are pouring their life energy into these projects. We are not meant to be conservative. That is not our role in society, yet we are cautious. Who are we to blame? Artists, funders, Canada Council, AFA, stakeholders, board members, administrators? How to let arts administrators lead. These positions are often held by artists who are creative, intelligent thinkers. Let them be that. How to hold boards at arm's length distance and allow for a field that embraces failure as a path to success. Why not charge developers an arts tax? Our cultural work is constantly being co-opted by business to sell lifestyle. Think of condo billboards. Culture is the cornerstone of any progressive urban plan, yet this is often expected to be given for free or at below market value for our time. How do we make paying for this normal? How do we make visual arts education mandatory for local, regional, and provincial governments so that politicians can actually become arts champions? How do we welcome private money and support without the ego or the compromise? And finally, how do we pursue actions that advance reconciliation? For the most part, the idea of an institution is a colonial one. The lesson from the TRC report is that reconciliation between Indigenous and settler cultures must inform every aspect of our relationship with each other. And it does require transformative action. So how do we address these from the place of an institution that is fundamentally flawed? These are some of the questions that I think about on a daily basis, and I hope you think about them too. Thank you for your time and your attention. Question? Yeah.
Thank you for that talk. That was great. I'm just curious, beyond the project space, do you do any programming outside of the museum?
We did. So So we're just obviously we're only 5 years old, and then the first couple of years we did quite a few, I would almost say programming. So we did projects in Montreal and Toronto, and I felt that was really important to get our name out into the kind of larger landscape of Canadian art. We've done several sort of collaborations with other institutions, also with Calgary. But after a certain point, I kind of felt that I wanted to kind of pull those things back. And I think one of the troubles that arts institutions have is they try and do too much. They try and be too many things for too many people. So what I've really asked my team to do is think about what do we do that's very good, and let's focus on that. And so we really decided that while it was fun to go off and host a series of talks in Toronto, it was actually, it was expensive, and it kind of took time away from maybe doing things that we were better at. So we really scaled all those things back and felt focusing on getting people to come to the foundation. So we do very little outreach. We really feel that people should come to us a lot, particularly around sort of like children's programs. We really feel that it's important for people to be in an art gallery to understand what that is, and that it becomes a normal activity. Come on, no more questions? I love questions. Yeah.
Following up from that last time, you talked about the importance of bringing people to the art galleries.
Yeah.
Can you point to examples of the opposite that you think are exciting or doing good work, where it's maybe outside a traditional institution or a traditional institution level?
I think a lot of that comes from a kind of a younger generation of people who maybe have come out of school and are a little, they're not seeing opportunities in the institutions coming as quickly as they want them to, and so they kind of self-generate projects. So I'll speak to Calgary because that's where I am now. So things like Rec City have been a great initiative to get artists together, take over vacant or underutilized or used space, and produce site-specific work. I think is exciting. Gets the community really involved, and it brings it down to kind of street level, which I think is exciting. So I think initiatives like that are really important. We see a lot of art galleries springing out of sort of garages and second bedrooms in Calgary as well, just because we don't have the industrial space anymore. So I think it's those initiatives and that kind of grassroots movement I think is really important. That's really where I came from. It's where you learn how to do everything and know what it takes to realize a project. So I think those are really exciting and necessary. Hi.
I was very fascinated by how you operate the foundation.
Yep.
By getting resources or by getting profits from the stores within the building. But I can't really imagine how, you mentioned that your operation budget is $2 million per year.
Yep.
And then would it really fulfill the whole operation budget? Like, and then you said you don't have to private funding,
Yep.
which is great, so it would give you your freedom.
So the building is an entire block. So there's probably, I don't know, 25 or 30 tenants in the building, and they're all paying fairly high rents for that. So essentially, once the mortgage is paid on the building, the family who owns the building, so they built the building, the family doesn't take any profit from that. So anything that they make from that goes into a fund that we pull that $2 million out of. So it works, and it was designed, I mean, when Jim Hill looked at, you know, you take your art gallery here, which is a standalone, beautiful standalone building, Jim looked at a model like that and thought, those things cost a lot. It doesn't make sense for an art gallery to sort of carry all those costs. So things like cleaning service and security and building maintenance, all of those things are embedded into the building. So the gallery actually pays rent, but from that rent, you know, I don't have to subcontract out for cleaning, and I don't have to subcontract it to maintenance or the HVAC guys or any of those kind of things to actually run the building. that's part of it. So it's not only financially you're creating a kind of cushion, but you're also freeing up the staff. And that's partly why we only have 7 people, is because I don't need sort of a facilities manager, because the building comes with a facilities manager, and so they do that work for us. So in some sense, you take away all those things that actually me as an arts professional, I don't know anything about HVAC systems, and I don't really want to know anything about HVAC systems. So we have someone that knows about that. Jim's philosophy is really hire the best people that know it in their field and allow them to do that. So I don't waste my time doing things that I'm not good at. I spend all my time doing things that I'm really good at and I love. So. Hey.
Hi. You mentioned that you have an app linked to the
Yeah.
foundation.
Yeah.
What role do you think social media and the app play in success of the foundation?
Huge, actually. Yeah, really huge. We've just hired a new marketing and communications person, and I think she's been probably 70% of her time on Instagram and tweeting. It's really quite phenomenal how people follow you through that, and it's really, I don't know about here, but I find Calgary is very much a word-of-mouth city. People, if they haven't come to the gallery, if they haven't heard that it's good from someone else, they won't go. So in some sense, social media plays that role. They trust the feed, or they see that it's interesting, and they sort of follow that along from sort of from an abstract or more personal interaction to, you know, coming to the gallery and going up to the 4th floor and actually walking into the building. One of the things why we developed the app was really feedback from Jim Hill, who gets to listen to me all the time talk about the artists and their practice and the ideas, but I'm not available to every single person that comes into the gallery, and he really wanted to make sure that that was available. So the app really provides, it's kind of like, it's a stand-in for myself or one of the other curators or educators or artists. We get the artists to speak about their work, or guest curators, and it's a way to kind of get into their brain for anyone who comes in. And the app is interesting. You can download it, obviously you can download it. You can use it at home, but if you come to the gallery, it's beacon triggered, and this is something we're still playing with, but essentially you can turn it on, put your phone in your pocket, and just walk through the galleries, and the beacons will trigger your experience. And that's also important for us, that we don't set a pre-described way for you to experience the exhibition. It's really, you kind of create your own journey, and you can go from one thing to the next as you see fit, and audio will pop up as you come close to a beacon, which is also really fun to play with. And I think it's this is only the second set of material that we've uploaded, but for me it could also be a really interesting place for artists to make work using that, so that you're actually experience not only visually a work, but you're actually experience a kind of a second layer of work. So I really like the idea of layers of information that you can kind of dive into and peel back depending on how much time you have and how interested you are and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been fun to do. Okay.
Yeah, speaking of outreach, those photographs of the people attending the openings were really exciting. There's a ton of people in there. Was it always like that? Did you have to do something to get them to come? And how many of them would you say are directly from like what you call the arts bubble as opposed to kind of a larger community?
Okay, so I think the secret to that was the first opening we had was free booze. But we stopped that pretty quickly. The food is still really good, and the liquor is still fairly cheap. No, I am joking. I don't know. I think there was a real vacancy in Calgary. I mean, Calgary has never had a contemporary and modern art gallery like you have here. It's never had that. It has a fantastic artist-run community. You know, those artist-run centers, Trek, Stride, New Gallery, they're 30 years old. Like, they have been there, but they're so underground. People just, the average person doesn't know where to find them. You have the 2 college galleries that are phenomenal, Nickel and IKG. Again, university doesn't pour any money into them. People don't know they're there. And I'm talking average person, right? You have a splattering of commercial galleries, and then you have the Glenbow that tries to do everything for everyone and kind of fails because of that. And then you have this new initiative called Contemporary Calgary, who kind of come and go. There's been a real vacancy in access to contemporary art in Calgary, and so people, what we found just talking to people is people travel for art. They'll go to New York and Paris, And so they make it a normal part of their traveling, but they don't consume it while they're in their day-to-day lives. So how do you make that kind of normal? Again, this sort of normalizing these activities. And it was interesting when I started 2 weeks before we publicly opened, and there was no programming in there. They didn't think they would do any public programming. They didn't think it was needed. And we quickly, the staff of 3 quickly realized that was the only way we were actually going to convince people to come in the door, is if we could find a way to actually engage people and talk to them. There is a need for kind of connection. You know, if you come into the gallery and you don't think you like contemporary art, give me half an hour of your time and you will. By the end of it, you will. So that one-on-one, and again, that's where the app content comes in terms of access. We're also, has anybody been to Esker? Yeah, all right. So we don't have an intern or a volunteer or someone just selling tickets when you first come into the gallery. All 6 staff take turns sitting that front desk. So I sit at that front desk. So you might come in one day and I'll be sitting there and you can have a conversation about what's in the gallery with me, who's curated it. And I think there's a huge difference. Access that. When was the last time you were in a gallery and you actually saw the people who were responsible for the exhibitions you were looking at? Do you even know where their offices are? Our offices are embedded right in that space. So my office looks down into the gallery. I see people in there. To get to the kitchen or to the bathroom or the front door or downstairs, I walk through the gallery. So I spend time in my exhibitions every day. And I don't think most institutions are designed like that. The offices are hidden away. I think once the exhibition is installed, you never go back into that show, or rarely do you go back into that exhibition. So I think it's really exciting that, I always like to think that my approach to the exhibition at the beginning is very different than my approach to I learn, every day I learn something about that exhibition. And I think being really honest about that, like, I don't know all the answers. I don't know exactly what the artist is doing or what their intent is, but I'm definitely interested in being there every day and thinking about that and sharing it. So if you do a tour with me at the beginning of the exhibition, it's probably going to be very different than if you tour at the end, because I live with those shows and I live with the work. So I think that engagement, not only we want you to engage, but we, the staff, actually engage in those exhibitions. And that it's a very subtle thing, but I think it makes a huge difference. And you feel it when you come in. You feel welcome. And I think that's also a big, the average, I think we want to talk about an average public, they're terrified of contemporary art. Because let's face it, often you go into a gallery, I've had this experience, you go in and you don't feel like you're welcome there. And I'm in the industry, and I walk in and I don't feel like I'm welcome. That's shitty, So, hey.
Curious about how you kind of transitioned from being a working artist to a curator and how that process worked for you.
It's really easy. I was just really good at organizing my friends. That's it. Someone had to do it. And you come out of school, I came out of grad school and was like, you want to show, you want to have opportunity, and there isn't any. And so you start doing it yourself, and you do one project, then you do another, and then you do another. And I actually started a collective, and that's how I went to Europe. Is I had a collective of 3 because that's what the Canada Council wanted, as a curatorial collective. We never got a penny from the Canada Council, but we formed our collective based on their rules. And we've actually just filled a suitcase up with videos because it was the late 90s and everyone was doing videos, so we filled up our suitcases with videos and went to Eastern Europe and just started showing up and showing them and getting invitations, and you do one thing and then you go on to the next, and all of a sudden you're curating more than you're making. And so the transition was really easy for me. Yeah. Hey.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the curatorial art mentioning and maybe what relates to.
In terms of less group shows and more individual shows?
Yeah, well, like how you mentioned you engage with the shows and learn from them every time. So, and you're obviously letting that inform the next show and the next show.
Yeah, I think, myself and the other curator, we spend a lot, we travel, we do tons of studio visits, you're just constantly looking. And for me, it's like, it really comes down to being personally touched by something, or there's a connection there. You know, I'm not really, I have to say that I'm not swayed by sort of popularity or the need to show the it artist. For me, it's about ideas and also working with good artists who are respectful and work hard and aren't divas. And, you know, we have a bit of an anti-diva policy at Esker. You know, people have to be respectful of everyone. So that's very important. It just feels, you know, it sounds really cheesy, but it feels right. It just feels right. And I go on gut a lot and intuition. And I guess that's just being in the industry for in so many years, and I think maybe being an artist, that informs my thinking about art and practice and conversations that I get to have with artists, and but also thinking about, is this work really relevant right now? We just opened Post Commodity, this incredible 4-channel video installation, and it deals with the border between Mexico and the US, which is an incredibly timely and important topic right now that is not just an American-Mexican issue, it's a kind of a world issue. Canada's being, of course, dragged into that. It's about xenophobia and nationalism and racism and all sorts of stuff, and it's an incredible work. And it was like, this would be great right now, let's do it. And because we don't have a board and because we don't have to raise, we don't apply for money, most, you have to kind of, when you apply for grants, you set out a kind of a 3-year path for that. And we do have a 3-year path because you can't not have one, but we also have space in our programming which allows us to go, that's amazing, let's call the artist, let's show that in a month. And that's how the kind of like the flexibility of our programming, I think, is really excellent, that we can actually respond to things we're seeing right now and get that into our programming immediately and not wait for like 4 years down the road. Like the Post Commodities work, this is the Canadian premiere of it, and they showed it at the Whitney Biennial last year, and we're showing it, you know, just opened. So that makes me really excited and proud to be able to show new work. And we also commission new work. So every show there's new work being created right here that then we don't own that. We don't add it to a collection. It just goes out into the world. So we're not interested again in kind of holding on to that. So yeah.
Just a question, and since there's somewhat of a business model, and maybe coaching it in those terms, great talk by the way, but what would the criteria for assessment be for your position, or
in terms
and
of
who makes that?
Like, are we successful?
Yeah, what's...
Yeah, well that's a really, that's something, when I first started I was kind of terrified actually of like, how do we know we're successful? And so it's something that I would go to Jim Hill and I would kind of say, are you happy with this? And he would say, yeah, it's great. You know, obviously we track numbers, we're interested in that, we're interested in growing our audience like any institution. But more, we just want people to see the good work we're doing. For Jim, it's really, are you relevant? That is the one word that he gave me for success. Relevant. That's it. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, hi.
According to that relevant position, have you had the opportunity to measure the impact that you are provoking socially? Because with the project with the books,
Yeah.
you can actually see the result.
Yeah, yeah.
With the other exhibition, I think.
Yeah.
Have you had the opportunity, or you have the form of measuring that?
I think we get constant feedback from people because, again, we're there, so we hear people. We get, you know, anywhere from 700 to 1,200 people at our openings. We have to have a lineup to get in. My favorite comment is, oh, this was my favorite show. I thought the last one was my favorite show, but this is my favorite show. So it's also nice to see people coming back again and again. We run it's called Crash Course in Contemporary Art. And again, this need to provide education. So it's once a month, 20 people meet. It runs over 8 months. We have a different person from the community come in and talk about, say, it's two-spiritedness, or it's performance art, or it's biennials. And the people that have gone through that, they come out the other end and they say, my life has been transformed. I never understood contemporary art before, but it's those like really small little gestures of And it really comes through kind of education. I always come back to education. I really, really do. These learning opportunities to engage people. You know, you can find opportunities to engage the little old lady that has lived across the street from our building, that has lived in the community for 50 years, or the director of the National Gallery of Canada. You know, there's opportunity for that whole sphere of people when they come to visit us, and I think that's really important. And never to become complacent, never think that we're actually like, oh yeah, we know our audience, or we've got that, or we're good. You know, like I push my staff constantly to never become complacent and always question what we're doing, you know. So, and I think that's really important to do that. And, you know, to cut out the bureaucracy, really cut that out and, you know, get to the core of the matter, so. Okay.
Looking down the line, looking at the model that Esker's put together and comparing that with European style models and collecting institutions and
Yeah.
sort of the Glenbow style, you know, global institution trying to do some things. What do you see as being the role for institutions and collecting in the future?
Yeah, that's a tough one because most of the institutions that have been around for such a long time have such big collections that they're so tied to, and to DSS work is so difficult. Collections are really tough. I mean, they have to happen because I think that work does need to go into both public and private collections. But I also think there needs to be ways to rethink how those collections are shown. For instance, the Museum of Anthropology in Vancouver, they have an open collection exhibition policy, so almost all of their artifacts are open and you can see them, either in displays or in drawers that you can pull out, and that kind of ability to experience a collection is really incredible. I think someone like the Glenbow could really use a model like that to be able to access. I've been in the archive and their collections areas, and they have incredible stuff. I mean, it's like the spoils of the world, right? But there is so little space and such little kind of resources to both care for those collections and to show them. It's a bit of a conundrum. I'm very happy I don't have one. I cared for one when I was in Banff. And to be honest, half the time you were worried about, you know, someone getting pen on it or spilling coffee on it or it getting destroyed, or there are a lot of work and a lot of pressure. I don't think they should be, I don't think they shouldn't exist, but I don't think every institution should have a collection. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And particularly if you're a new institution, don't start collecting. So I think Jim's kind of seeing that up front and saying, no, don't collect. You can borrow. You can borrow anything you want, which is great for us. So, yeah. And to not be so scared. I mean, I think that the role of private is also really important. I mean, there used to be a lot more collecting in private businesses, particularly when the oil years were better, as you know. And I think some onus should be put on private corporations to be more supportive of art and to collect and to have those in spaces. Jim and Susan do have a collection, but their collection is at their business, and they really believe that people should live with real art, not posters or clays or reproductions, but they should live with real art every single day. And in fact, we've given tours to like the shipping and receiving at Jim's company, which is essentially an oil and gas computer technology company. And the guys in shipping and receiving know more about contemporary art than some undergrads that I've met, just because they live around it and they're really excited. And Jim is passionate about it and he loves talking about it, and they get excited. So we also have some of that work in the lobbies of the Esker building that you can see. So I think private collecting, there's a role for the private world to step up and invest in art, you could say, a little bit more heavily, particularly in Alberta. That'd be good.
Is that it?
Sounds